Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 237 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. On this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastering. I've been running RPGs for over 28 years now. That's right, over 28 years. And I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. I've got a great episode for you today. I'm going to cover a variety of topics. Going to be discussing some feedback I've gotten on the episode so far in season 13 and revisiting some topics that we've covered in previous episodes. So stay tuned for that. That'll be a lot of fun. I changed my little intro. I used to say over 26 years, and I guess it's been a while since I figured that out, because I figured it out today and realized it's actually been over 28 years. So I decided to be a little more accurate. So welcome to episode 237 and welcome to 2019. This should be the first episode of 2019 if everything goes as planned. And so I hope everyone enjoyed the various holidays and is ready to go for a great new year of gaming. So before we move on to our feedback today, I want to give a shout out to our new patron, A Quiet Guy. Thank you so much. I believe this is the first new patron since I came back for season 13. And so it's great to have you aboard, sir. And thank you so much for your patronage. And thank you to everyone who supports the shows in all the great ways you do so. I really appreciate it. So we have a lot of feedback to go through today. I'm hoping to get through most of it, if not all of it. So let's proceed on with the program and hear some of your feedback. All right, so already in season 13, we've covered quite a few topics. And as always, I've been getting fantastic feedback from listener GMs about the various topics. And I thought I would just do an episode and get through as much of it as possible. And we'll just see where this takes us and have some fun with this today. So first off, I've gotten some feedback over on my YouTube channel about my Hinterlands of Elandria D&D campaign and actual play that I post on YouTube. And also, just really quickly, for any newer listeners, what's going on with the actual play is there are basically two versions of the actual play you can enjoy. One is on YouTube and has video of our game sessions. Tends to not have as good audio quality and tends to be less edited than the audio version, which is part of this podcast, Game Master's Journey. So if you like video, you can check out the game sessions on YouTube. Also, new sessions tend to appear on YouTube first. That's not always the case. A lot of times there will be one or two or more sessions on YouTube that haven't made it into the podcast yet. However, for the podcast, I do more editing of, cutting out kind of non-relevant stuff. And I also do two separate recordings of our game sessions for the actual play. I do a video recording and I do a separate audio recording. And just because of the equipment that I'm using, just out the gate, the audio recording tends to have better audio to start with than the video recording does. And of course, I do post-processing and things like that to make the audio as good as I can. But you're often limited by the source material you have to work with. So the audio in the podcast tends to be of better quality than the audio in the video. And I'm trying to work that out so that they'll be the same. But right now with the equipment I have and the software I have, that's just kind of the way it is. So Cameron on YouTube says, I just realized you don't have a lot of views. I came by your videos because you have such great content. awesome channel. So thank you, Cameron. And yeah, I wish I had more views of my videos too. So if you enjoy my actual play, please tell your friends. All right, so I got some feedback on episode 231, which was the first episode of season 13, in which I talked about burnout. And more specifically, I talked about my burnout, both with podcasting and running D&D. And I got quite a bit of feedback on that episode, so I thought I would share some of that with you today. Dave wrote in and asked that I review and discuss third-party D&D supplements. He says there's a lot of great third-party supplements out there for 5th edition, and he'd like to hear me discuss it as I do a lot of the Wizards products for 5th edition. And I'd love to do that, Dave. I'd be happy to do that. Honestly, the main reason I discuss so many of the Wizards products is they will often send me review copies of their products. And so, I can then read them and enjoy them and discuss them. Unfortunately, I'm not in a financial position right now to buy a bunch of RPG products. I can't even really honestly afford to buy the RPG products that I really want. So I certainly can't afford to buy RPG products just to review them. So if you're listening to this and you're a third-party publisher for D&D 5th edition and you would like me to discuss your products on the show, I'd be happy to take a look at them if you want to send me review copies. But just unfortunately right now, just the reality of my situation right now is the only way I can really do that is if I get a review copy, because there are RPG things that I want that I don't have because I just don't have the money to spare. So again, I can't really buy things just to review them as much as I would like to. All right. The Lego guy called in and left me another voicemail. I really enjoy the Lego guy's voicemails and really appreciate them, and really wish I got more voicemails from other listener GMs as well, because they're really nice for the show because I can play clips from those and you can hear the message in the person's own voice instead of me reading an email or something like that. So thank you, the Lego guy, for your voicemail. And he also wrote or called in discussing episode 231 about burnout, and has a couple suggestions for us that he's tried as far as how to get past that feeling of burnout as a GM and bring some more excitement into the game. So let's hear what the Lego guy has to say.
Oh, hey Lex, this is the Lego guy. I was calling. I just listened to the GM Burnout episode, and I was like really like kind of struck by the level of honesty. Like, I feel like most people that are commitment oriented, where it's like I'm going to commit to a game or something like that, are the kind of people that won't admit to themselves when they need to take a break. And I mean, I've definitely hit that wall. I mean, I've been running my company game nigh on 300 sessions now. And the company expects it every Sunday, and it's a good chance when they take a shot at me. But I was gonna throw out two suggestions that I've done for when I'm feeling burned out. Like, one is relates heavily to what I call, like Dungeon Master's disease, or I think I've heard it called World Builder's disease, where you look at the world, as a GM, you look like from like God looking down, and the players look at it out of the eyes of their players. So it's like you're big, they're small, right? And so it's like almost hard to like go down to the players level, and it's hard for the players to go up to the GM's level. And I think that separation like sometimes causes like this feeling of like this game isn't getting anywhere, or like I'm not excited. And so like when that happens, I one of the things I'll do is I'll design a location, that where anything can happen, where I'll just sort of set up some artifacts or like some NPCs, right? And I just have no idea what's going to happen. I'm just like, okay, they can talk to each of these players. I'm like, that's kind of like, the godly act of creating a town that GMs, I think, love so much. And then the other thing I'll do is sometimes I will let the players make new characters that relate to a situation that they're in the campaign. And then I'll be like, okay, like, you're going to play this group of people in town dealing with the Mycadid invasion that just started. And it'll, like, anchor them in the world, and it'll get you excited again. And nothing makes players more excited than making characters. Like, I rarely see anyone more excited in the first session as far as players are concerned, right? That they're excited about the first session like you are about the boss fight, right? But yeah, again, I really appreciated the honesty and love the show, of course. Have a good week.
Thanks so much for that feedback, the Lego guy. Really appreciate it. And yeah, those are great ideas. And yeah, thank you for appreciating my blunt honesty and kind of admitting some of my own shortcomings as a GM. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I think GMs do tend to have this kind of personality where we don't want to admit to ourselves and to other people when we need a break. And that's really interesting. And yeah, great thoughts about DMs or world builder's disease and how that in itself can lead to burnout. And I think that's definitely true. And I really like your idea of creating a scene or a location where kind of anything can happen, and you set up some interesting NPCs or some interesting things going on in the hopes that the players will react to those things. But not really having an agenda or knowing what's going to come out of that, and just kind of seeing what happens. And, that really brings up a really good point that I don't know that I mentioned at all in episode 231, in that in addition or instead of taking an actual break from the game you're running, like the Lego guy's talking about here, a great solution to burnout sometimes can just be kind of changing things up a little bit. Like the Lego guy suggests, have the players play different characters for a couple sessions, or a session. That's a great idea, and it lets them change gears and try something different. It lets you change gears and try something different. And sometimes just doing something different for a little while is what the doctor ordered. But I also love this idea of creating this scene where kind of anything can happen, and you seed some interesting NPCs or interesting magic items or whatever situations in this scene that the players hopefully will react to, and it can go different ways, but you don't really have a clear idea of what's going to happen, and you don't even have a preference as to what's going to happen. And just that kind of open-ended possibility can really kind of refresh you as a GM, because whatever you think might happen from that, what actually happens based on what the players decide to do, will almost always be something you never thought of. At least that's how it works with me. And just, I don't know, throwing in that random element to your game, that kind of chaotic element where, when this session is over, we might be in a very different place than we were when we began. And none of us, including the GM, know what that's going to be. Sometimes that can be what the doctor ordered too. And that can really get you excited about the game again, because now you have this brand new situation that you can react to with your NPCs as a GM. And you've got, the next week or however long until your next session to think about that. And those are great suggestions. And I think those can be great ways to kind of overcome burnout and maybe not have to take a break or not have to take as long of a break. So thanks so much for those suggestions. Really great stuff. Let's see. I got another comment on this episode from YouTube from Silkwesser, I think maybe, who said there's good advice in this episode, which can even be applied to other types of projects besides gaming. And yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you feel that way, because I was kind of hoping that. It wasn't really my thought or intention going into the episode, but as I was producing it, it kept occurring to me that, wow, these things I'm saying really could apply to a lot of things, not just gaming. So I'm glad that I'm not the only one that feels that way, and hopefully lots of people will find it useful. And got another comment on YouTube from OG Dweeb on this episode, who says, I'm horrible when it comes to follow through. I'll obsessively participate in one of my many hobbies for months, then burn out and move to the next in a never ending circular pattern. Very insightful. Yes, so I am not the only one who does this. OG Dweeb has the same things going on. So it's always good to know that you're not alone. Also got some great feedback on episode 233, which was a Dungeon Master's Guide discussion episode in which we were talking about mapping movement and wilderness survival in the wilderness as an adventure setting. Listener GM Josh shared some great weather tables that he came up with for generating weather on our MeWe community. So go join our MeWe community and check those out. Super cool stuff. And I'll have a link to the MeWe community in the show notes at starwalkerserials.com so you can find that and join us there. Also got an email from Martin in Germany. All right, so Martin sent me a really nice email that I want to share some parts of with you. And I'm always excited anytime I get feedback from people outside the US. Nothing against my American listeners, of course. But it's just so cool that people all around the world listen to this show, and that all around the world we're brought together by this hobby of gaming and playing RPGs. It's super cool. So Martin says, I just listened to your addendum to episode 233 about your hiatus. Good thing you found some time to refocus. Things like that are very important. This is your life. Yes, that's a great point. But even better that you rediscovered your excitement for D&D and the podcast. We missed you. Well, thank you. I missed you guys too. That was probably the biggest downer about the hiatus for me personally, was I missed all the great feedback that I get from all my listeners. I too have a full-time job and GM 2 adventures, one of my own creation and one where we are playing Tomb of Annihilation. And just with those 2 campaigns, it can get tiresome sometimes. Not to think of managing several games, a podcast, and a whole community. I have a lot of respect for that. Well, thank you, Martin. I appreciate that. Yeah, it can be a lot sometimes. D&D is a hobby where you constantly challenge yourself, not physically, but creatively and socially, and this can be hard. Yeah, that's a great point, totally. But in the long run, it should be more fun than pain, and I hope it is. Yeah, totally. Absolutely agree. This is something we do for fun at the end of the day. There's so much sensation and wonder in this old form of modern gaming. Is there anything that compares? I don't think so. And yeah, I totally agree. Don't get me started on what I love about tabletop role-playing games compared to other forms of gaming like board games and video games and things like that. Yeah, there's really something special about playing tabletop RPGs that no other form of gaming can really match. I hope you know that there are people out there, far out there, people you touch, people listening to every word, laughing, learning, waiting for the next episode, the next tip, some trick, every piece of advice or creative idea. That's crazy. Yeah, I totally agree. And thank you for that. And that's awesome. And yeah, it's crazy that there are people in Germany and Australia and South Africa and Canada and Brazil and all over the world listening to this show. It's really amazing. Let's see. Martin goes on to say, your show is by far the best podcast in content and production quality you can get. You can be proud of that. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. So Martin has a question here, or a possible topic. I just changed my method from using Roll20 to using a battle mat with miniatures. Do you have any advice for handling terrain? Did you ever try things like the D&D dungeon tiles or other third-party products or things from Pathfinder or Warhammer or drawing by hand? So yeah, honestly, I'm probably not the best person to give you advice about things like that, just because I don't use dungeon tiles or anything fancy like that. About the fanciest I've gotten when it comes to miniatures and things like that is I do have some of the battle maps that have been put out by Paizo that are dry erase maps. A few of them are just kind of plain grids. And then I do have a few that are like forests or whatever for when I'm playing in person and want to use miniatures. Those are great. Really, the ones I use the most is I have a large one that's just a grid, but it's on kind of a glossy cardboard or paperboard, so you can draw on it with a dry erase marker and then wipe it off, and that's super useful. It's been quite a while since I've played D&D in person and used any kind of miniatures, but when I do, that's what I use. I use some kind of dry erase grid that I can, before the session, kind of draw and outline things on, and then as we go, I can draw on it as well. I've never used anything like dungeon tiles before. Honestly, I feel like things like that are a lot better in theory and in your mind than they are in practice. I imagine they take some time to set up. They seem like they'd be kind of distracting and disruptive at the table. You kind of have to stand up to see very well with those kinds of things. So you have players constantly having to stand up and sit down and stand up and lean over to see what's going on and move their characters. And honestly, I find that stuff to be really distracting. And you can see this on actual play. So, if you don't use this stuff yourself, but you wonder what it's like, check out some actual plays. For instance, Critical Role, at least the later ones, they use dungeon tiles or something similar, and just watch a session and see how much time they spend dealing with that stuff and kind of distracted by that stuff that's kind of taking them out of the role playing and taking them out of the game, and decide if that's something that you'd be okay with or not. Me, I don't like those kinds of distractions. And, at least for me, I have to weigh something like that. What are the benefits? Like, how is this going to enhance the play of the game and save time at the table versus the drawbacks, which are, how is this going to take more time at the table because I have to set it up and deal with it? And how is it going to detract from the game because it's distracting people, or they're getting too focused on, their miniatures and the terrain and not role playing and things like that. So that's something you have to consider, and everybody's going to have their own opinions about what they want to use and what not. Most of the time I find myself using a grid lately is playing online, and we usually play on Roll20, and, in some ways that's easier and more useful than, a physical grid, but in other ways it's more of a pain and a headache too. So everything, there's pros and cons. But yeah, as far as like products that I've used or would recommend, I really recommend, the grids that Paizo and other companies sell that are dry erase, where you can kind of draw your own thing on it. I know Chessex makes a really nice one that I don't have, but DMs I've played under have had, that's pretty good size that you roll up. That's really nice, much nicer than the ones that Paizo makes that are cardboard. This one is, I think it's vinyl. It's some kind of plastic, but really nice, that Chessex makes. So I'd really recommend something like that. And then the only other thing is, I don't have a lot of miniatures, so I will often use things like chess pieces or pieces from board games or checkers or dice or whatever I have on hand to use instead of miniatures. And finally, Martin says, totally understandable that you lost some patrons during your absence, but I know of at least one guy that signed up to support on the Patreon. And so, yeah, thanks so much for that, Martin, and shout out to Martin. I wonder if you're the new patron that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, A Quiet Guy. Could be. I didn't dig into that to try to find out who A Quiet Guy is exactly. But if that's you, Martin, or if not, thanks for becoming a patron. Really appreciate it. Got a comment on episode 235, which was about settlements and unusual environments. from Josh on our MeWe community. And Josh says, great episode as always. I did want to comment on the alignment discussion. While I have decided to forego asking my players to give me an alignment, I still find it very useful for a shorthand way to describe how monsters may act. It isn't always super clear what a monster's personality might be, and the generic 2D alignment gives a very quick and dirty approximation for how to roleplay different monster types. And yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, that's a problem when I just do an aside like that, like I did with alignment, is I'm going to miss some really huge important points. And that's one. I was briefly talking about how I'm not a huge fan of alignment as a proscriptive tool, which is to say to tell players what they can and can't do with their characters, or as a way to punish players for playing their characters in a way you don't like, which is how some GMs use alignment. And I think a lot of times when you have players who are complaining about alignment, they're complaining because they have a GM who uses it in those ways, who uses it as sort of a stick to beat the players into submission so that they play the kind of game he or she wants to run, or they play the kind of characters he or she wants to have in the game. So that's at least been my experience. But I do use alignment in a descriptive way. And I do think it can be useful for that, although not necessary. I mean, you don't need alignment to do that. You can totally describe a character, their morality and outlook and things like that very succinctly without needing to use alignment. But it can be useful. It can, as I said in the episode, it can be useful for players to help them figure out what their character's like. And as Josh is pointing out here, it can also be useful for GMs when dealing with monsters and NPCs as a kind of shorthand for getting into this character's head a little more quickly without needing a bunch of description to do so. And that's definitely helpful. When you're preparing for an adventure, or maybe you're going to run some kind of random encounter on the fly and you pick some creature out of the monster manual and you don't have a ton of time to prepare, and you're trying to think about how would this monster behave, what kinds of decisions might it make. Alignment can be helpful for that. You would probably roleplay a lawful evil monster much differently than you would a chaotic evil monster or a true neutral monster, right? So it does give you some ideas. For instance, a monster who is lawful evil is probably going to be more likely to be willing to parlay with the characters maybe than one that's chaotic evil. I would say the same for a monster who's neutral evil. If you can convince it that talking with you instead of fighting you is in its best interest, then I think a neutral evil monster would be possibly willing to parlay instead of fight. Intelligence is a big factor too. So me, when I'm looking at a monster and trying to decide how I'm going to role play that monster, two big things I look at are its alignment and its intelligence. Those are going to tell you a lot about how this monster or character might approach a given situation or decision. So, their alignment's going to tell you one thing, and then the intelligence will tell you kind of what their capacity is. If their intelligence is really low, then subtle things are going to kind of go over their heads, and they're going to have more simple solutions to problems, where creatures with a really high intelligence could come up with any solution that a player character might come up with. And so that can be really useful too. So yeah, I don't want to, throw out the baby with the bathwater and say, alignment has no use, just completely ignore it. It can have a use, especially for GMs like me and other kind of older school GMs who have already internalized what alignment is. Then you'll find situations where you can use it, like quickly figuring out how you're going to roleplay an NPC or a monster. Now, whether it's worth it for a new GM to learn this system in order to be able to do that, I don't know. I can't really say. I would guess probably not, because again, there's other ways to succinctly describe someone's morality that ultimately would probably be more descriptive and accurate, although they might take a few more words. So yeah, I don't know, but definitely alignment can be a useful tool, but it's not a necessary one. So really, I think it comes down to each GM, whether they want to use it, and if so, to what extent they want to use it. But I would caution you against using alignment as a way to try to control what your players do. Let them make the decisions they want to make. Here's my little tidbit on that. Cause a lot of GMs, especially newer GMs, will be tempted to want to control the decisions the players make for whatever reason. They don't want to run for evil characters, or they want them to follow the adventure they've laid out and not go off track, or various other reasons. And, you want to be careful with that. I've found it's far more fun and useful and interesting to let players do whatever they want to do and then think about consequences, and if there is behavior that you're seeing that for whatever reason you don't want to see anymore, whether characters are doing evil things or they're acting against other party members or whatever, instead of saying you can't do that, or saying you can't do that, that doesn't fit your alignment, let them do the thing and then show them through the consequences of those actions why that's not a good idea for something to do. So if you have a player who's being a murder hobo and killing everything in sight, let them do it and have there be consequences. They get arrested and tried, or they tick off the wrong person and they go and get friends and come back to get revenge, or, the possibilities are endless. So instead of spending your energy thinking of ways to stop the players from doing what they want to do, spend that energy thinking about, how will the NPCs in the area react to this? How will the setting in the world react? How will the people in authority and the law enforcement react, and all those things? And when you start thinking about those things, you're going to find obvious consequences to the thing this character has done that would be perceived as negative by the player and are completely realistic and plausible and believable. And you can use those consequences, and not only will that hopefully dissuade the player from doing that thing again, but it's far more rewarding and enjoyable for the players than you just being like, you can't do that. Let them do it and then let them suffer the consequences. And that's often awesome gameplay and some of the best sessions that you'll have in your campaign when things like that happen. So yeah, as long as you're not using alignment to browbeat the players into playing the way you think they should play, if you're just using it as a descriptive tool and as a shorthand that you and the players can use to quickly describe various outlooks and moralities, then I think it can be quite useful as long as you're using it in that way. All right, for the second part of our feedback today, I'm going to address some feedback that I got on episode 233, which was about settlements and unusual environments. However, this feedback isn't about that topic. It's about something I kind of mentioned in passing in episode 233, which I mentioned that I'd started running Numenera again, which I haven't played or run in quite a few years. And I got some feedback on that and people wanting to hear more about Numenera and me returning to it. So if you're a fairly new listener or you're new to me and Starwalker Studios, you may not know that before I did Game Master's Journey, I did a podcast called GM Intrusions, which was very similar to Game Master's Journey, but focused on the game Numenera. And really GM Intrusions, really Game Master's Journey is just a continuation of GM Intrusions. But after doing GM Intrusions for a couple years, I got to a point where I wanted to be able to discuss other games. Specifically, I wanted to discuss D&D, which I'd started playing and running again, and I wasn't playing Numenera anymore. And I wanted a show where I could in the future discuss any role-playing game I wanted, whatever I happened to be playing or running at the time. And so Game Master's Journey was born. But if you've listened to all 237 episodes of Game Master's Journey and you want more similar stuff, check out GM Intrusions. There's 70 odd episodes of that podcast that you can enjoy as well. Had some luminaries on that show, including Bruce Cordell, Monty Cook, and Shauna Germain, as well as numerous other listener GMs that unfortunately a lot of them I haven't heard from since I stopped doing GM Intrusions. I really miss those guys, but I guess they're not interested in non-Numenera games, or I just don't hear from them, which, you never know who's listening that you don't hear from. So if any of you are listening, Jim, Jeremy, Darcy, love you guys, miss you guys, say hi sometime. All right, so Tom commented on episode 233 on MeWe and said, great episode, I really liked it. I would love to know more about your thoughts about coming back to Numenera and how your approach has changed after 5th edition. Revisiting Numenera, is there anything you will bring to your next D&D game? So I'll hit this one really quick before we get into the next one. So honestly, So my Numenera group I set up, we were going to play on Fridays, and Fridays aren't a great day, as I'm sure everybody knows, to play because people always have things going on Fridays. And then the holidays hit and all this stuff. So we got together once for a character creation session. I thought we were going to make characters in like an hour and then play for a couple hours, but we ended up spending pretty much the entire session making characters. And then I did like one scene after that. And that's all we've done. So unfortunately, I haven't run enough Numenera again to see how my approach may change after all this time. And I really, haven't done it enough to have anything that I would bring into my 5th edition game. So I don't really have great answers to that. Other than one thing, which is something Numenera does that I really like, is instead of getting down into feet when it's talking about ranges as far as how far you can move in a round or how far a spell can go or how far you can shoot an arrow, instead of getting down into feet for that, they just use range bands similar to the Star Wars games and a lot of other games where you just have like immediate range, which is basically you're in melee, and then like close range, which is you're within 30 feet. And then I think long range, which is farther than that. And I might not be remembering those exactly because I haven't run or played Numenera much in recent years, but I really like that simplification. And that's something I've considered many times bringing to D&D. It'd be fairly easy to do that for the most part, unless you're using a grid. The only time things get more granular than that is with a lot of the spells have weird ranges that aren't just 30 feet or 120 feet or whatever. But other than that, and even with that, you could put them into a short, medium, long range category pretty easily. So I've considered using that. And honestly, a lot of times when I'm running Theater of the Mind, that's basically what I'm doing anyway. I'm not worried about individual feet. I'm just thinking about, okay, these characters are in melee, these are short range, these are long range, and I don't really worry much beyond that. So that's one thing that definitely I learned from Numenera and also from the Star Wars games that I really like and sort of use in D&D and have often thought about just flat out using it outright in D&D. Also got some nice emails from listener GM Matt, and he and I emailed back and forth a little bit, and he was wondering about the Numenera stuff as well. Matt says, I've been listening to your podcast for over a year now. I found you through your GM Intrusions podcast as I'm a big Numenera fan and was thirsty for more Numenera goodness. I've been steadily working my way through all of the GM Intrusion shows and have been going through your other ones as well, and was wondering why it was you switched away from Numenera. I know you've got a lot of podcasts going, but now that N2D2 has come out, sounds like a Star Wars droid, I was curious as to your opinions on it. Any plans to go back? I'm sad that just as I'm ramping up my Numenera playing, you're no longer producing Numenera podcasts. But don't get me wrong, I do enjoy all the other things you're doing too. It's just that I've been getting so much from those Numenera podcasts and wish there were someone like you producing stuff for N2. So I'm not really in the know when it comes to Numenera anymore. I honestly haven't paid much attention to it over the past few years. But I'm assuming N2 is referring to basically Numenera second edition, although they were not calling it that, but that's kind of what it is, where they released 2 new core books for Numenera, which I'm blanking on what they're called, but I think we'll get to that here in these emails. So let me just go through this a little bit. So Matt was wondering, why I quit playing Numenera and running Numenera, and I guess even podcasting about Numenera. So yeah, I stopped playing a few years ago, about the time I started playing 5th edition. I'm actually, if you're a newer listener, you may not realize this and it may shock you, but I was actually quite resistant to 5th edition. In the early days, I didn't want to play it. I didn't want to try it. I didn't want to like it. And this was when I was playing Numenera, and was largely because the last D&D edition I really enjoyed was 3.5. And I took a little break from role playing. And when I came back, 4th edition had come out, and I was not at all impressed with 4th edition. I was kind of like, what have they done to my D&D? So I started playing Pathfinder, and, Pathfinder got too complicated. Honestly, 3.5 got too complicated. But Pathfinder just kind of dialed that up to 11. And so that was when I heard about Numenera, actually before it came out, and got really excited about Numenera a lot because it was supposed to be more simplified and not as mechanically intense as Pathfinder or 3.5 D&D, and also was science fantasy, which I'm super into. I'm much more of a sci-fi fan than I am a fantasy fan. So science fantasy, if it's the right type of science fantasy, is really appealing to me, and more so than just normal fantasy. So I was really excited about the game, and I ran it and played it for a few years when it first came out, and I really enjoyed it for quite a while. But then I finally kind of got over my prejudices and decided to give 5th edition a fair shot. And I read through the basic rules, got a copy of the player's handbook, and started running it a bit, and really started digging it. And I'm a pretty busy guy, and it's been a long time since I've had the time or the mental bandwidth to run more than one system of RPG game at the same time. There were days in my college days and high school days when I was almost always running multiple games. Usually I was running Changeling the Dreaming, and then either Star Wars as the second game, which was West End D6 Star Wars back then, or the second game was D&D. So I was kind of always running Changeling, and then either running Star Wars or D&D as like a second game. And I can't do that anymore. I just don't have that kind of time. So these days I run one game at a time. That way I can be solid on that rule set and have those rules fresh in my head. I find if I try to do 2 games at the same time, I just don't do either of them as well, because I don't have enough time to really get to know the rules. So when I started running D&D, I took a break from Numenera so that I could really, grok this new 5th edition system. And as I continued to play D&D, I just didn't really have a whole lot of motivation to go back to Numenera. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I love the setting of the Ninth World, which is the setting of Numenera. It's Earth 1 billion years in the future, pretty much. And I like the ideas of weird discovery that Numenera is all about. Of course, you can do that in D&D too. I just personally found the system of Numenera itself a little lacking after I'd run and played it for a couple years or however long it was. The same simplicity in design that initially attracted me to the system and makes the game relatively easy to learn, to teach, to run, and to play. That same simplicity also, for me at least, leads to a feeling eventually of a lack of much to do mechanically to really dig my teeth into the game as a player specifically. So after a while, I just found myself wanting a game with a little bit more complexity mechanically than Numenera, but not getting to the point of like Pathfinder, but just a little more nuance in the mechanics. Now, as far as the 2nd edition of Numenera, I don't have a huge amount of interest in that personally. If or when I decided to run Numenera again, I'd be fine just running the version I have, the books I have. From what I read about the new books, it didn't really seem like there was enough there to warrant a new edition, or at least to warrant me paying for one. I also got kind of bit by The Strange, which was another game that Monte Cook Games, the producer of Numenera, came out with. And I backed that Kickstarter and was very disappointed when I got the core book for The Strange and found that a good portion of it was copy pasted from the Numenera book, warts and mistakes and confusing or not great rules and all. They didn't take the opportunity to revise the cipher system when they came out with The Strange, even though they knew there were various issues with it. They just copy pasted it. So, I got this book for $60 that I felt like at least half of it I already had, which wasn't a great experience for me, and definitely didn't instill a lot of confidence in me going forward with Monte Cook Games, especially when it comes to something like these new books for Numenera, where we're going to make some relatively minor changes to the system, but we're going to print a whole new core book, and not just one, but 2 whole new core books that we want you to buy at $60 a pop or whatever they are. Now, one of the books is more focused on, like basically in D&D terms, like building a stronghold and stuff like that, I think, which is new to the game. But the other book is just a revamp of the Numenera core book. So I don't have a lot of interest in that personally, definitely not with my financial situation. I would not shell out money for those books. Now, if Monte Cook Games wants to send me review copies of them, I'd be happy to talk about them. But in all my years podcasting for them, they never sent me review copies of anything. So I won't be holding my breath for that. And then another big reason, honestly, that I haven't returned to Numenera to any extensive degree since I started playing 5th edition. And this may not be super relevant to a lot of you, but as you know, I produce my own supplements for D&D, and Wizards, in their awesomeness, has created the Open Gaming License, which allows people like me to publish supplements for D&D and sell them and maybe even make a little money, or at least recoup some of the costs. I guarantee you, no one's getting rich independently publishing RPG supplements. That's for sure. But hopefully they're at least breaking even. And that's really fantastic. Now, Numenera, on the other hand, has a limited license, which is nothing like the Open Gaming License. It's much more restrictive what you can do, and you have to pay for the privilege. It's something like $100 per product. that you want to release on the limited license. So there's a lot of fantastic material out there, various podcasts and blog posts about publishing in the RPG industry and how difficult, almost impossible it is to make any real money at it. If you are independently publishing RPG supplements and you are making enough money to cover costs like what you're spending for art, what you're spending for software, and things like that, not counting the cost of your time, just the actual out-of-pocket costs of producing that supplement. If you sell enough and make enough money to get that money back, you're more successful by far than most people trying to publish RPG supplements. Being able to actually make enough money to cover the time that you put into it is something, honestly, I think probably very few independent publishers are doing at all, even to make minimum wage, much rather to make what they probably should be making as a game designer. So it's really difficult. It's really difficult, even with the open gaming license, and you don't have to throw any bones to wizards or anything like that. It's almost impossible to make enough money to cover your time, much rather like make a profit or make a living at it. So when you take that situation and then you throw in the fact that you have to pay $100 just to do the thing, above and beyond whatever you have to pay artists or cartographers or whatever else, your chances of even recouping your costs, much rather making any money on it, are practically zero. And I actually wrote a blog post about that, where I broke down, what that money that you're paying for the license is really costing you, and how much that impacts your bottom line, and blah, 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 as well as some of the things about that license people didn't realize. And I actually, without going into a lot of detail, I got some pushback on that blog post from Monte Cook Games themselves. They felt because I had purchased a limited license from them, and because they had, I don't know, in some way at some time maybe promoted my podcast somehow, I'm not sure. They felt that gave them the right to give me crap about my blog post, which was either fact or my opinion, and both of those were clearly identified as such. These are the facts. Here are my opinions. They felt that they had the right to give me crap about that and try to control what I say to my readers and what I say to my listeners. And at the time, I had actually bought a limited license from them. I was going to publish my Obsidian Monolith adventure and try to sell that I'd come up with for Numenera. And so, yeah, I personally saw that as a conflict of interest. I'm like, first and foremost, I'm a podcaster, and I want to have the freedom to say whatever I want to say about whatever game I want to talk about, and not feel like I'm in the pocket of Monte Cook Games or anyone else. And since you guys seem to think that this limited license gives you the right to try to censor me when I'm making completely legitimate statements, I didn't think that was cool. So I told them, you can have your limited license back. And I did not publish the Obsidian Monolith. I just have it up for free on my blog. And yeah, that was the end of that. So, that is a big reason that I didn't return to it, because I do like to write and publish supplements. And there's no way I would ever do that with Monte Cook Games, at least until they had something on par with Wizards' open gaming license. So, D&D is where it's at. There's an open gaming license. I can do whatever I want. I can publish whatever I want. And, I would come up with my own game system in my own setting and publish stuff for that before I tried to publish stuff for Numenera again, which is a shame, because I love the setting and, the system's okay. And I think if I took the system and tweaked it and did things I wanted to do with it, I could probably come up with something I was really happy with. But yeah, that'll never happen, unfortunately, but that's the way things go sometimes. So yeah, I thought I would talk about that a little bit. I've never really gone into much of that. And I know a lot of people that have been listening from way back in the GM Intrusions days, would appreciate a little bit more information on why I kind of left Numenera by the wayside. So really the primary reason was just I was kind of had my fill of it and trying new things. But then, the whole gaming license thing really keeps me with D&D because this is a game that I can publish for and I can release my own ideas for, and there's no BS and there's no headaches, and I have full creative freedom, and I don't have to pay exorbitant amounts of money in order to do so. So, I mean, from that perspective, there's no reason to deal with a limited license or any of that BS I was dealing with. I'll just stick with D&D and do what I do. All right. So that wraps it up for the feedback for today. So thank you so much to everyone who commented, who wrote in, who called in. I really appreciate it. And if you would like your thoughts and ideas to be featured in a future episode, feedback or otherwise, there are a lot of great ways you can get a hold of me, and I'll tell you all of those at the bottom of the show. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for episode 237 of Game Master's Journey. If you would like to submit feedback on this or any of the episodes and maybe be featured in a future episode yourself, you can shoot me an email at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker, and you can call my voicemail. That phone number is 951-GMJ-LEX1. That's 951-465-5391. I love voicemails because I can use them on the show. So if you've got something to say, give me a call. I'd love to hear from you. You can also join our community on MeWe, also on Discord, and you can find links to all those in the show notes at starwalkercos.com/Game Master's Journey. Finally, I have a couple 5-star iTunes reviews, and I'd like to thank those people. So huge thank you to Jay Kokoski for your 5-star review on iTunes. Jay says, Lex delivers great content in a conversational style. Highly recommended. Thank you so much. And a huge thank you to Big Josh H99 for your iTunes review. Big Josh says, Lex is very knowledgeable about RPGs and being a GM. He gives great advice for new GMs. The actual play segments are creative and interesting. If you have a question, if you contact Lex, he actually responds. The supplements he sells are informative and fun also. So thank you, Big Josh. And that's true. I do respond to every email I get. So yeah, I guess that's a special thing. I didn't realize. I assumed everybody did that. So if you enjoy Game Master's Journey and you'd like to help support the show, you can find all the ways to do so at starwalkercos.com/support. The best way you can support the show and my RPG endeavors is to check out my latest self-published D&D supplement, Relics of Power. And just for all of those who have purchased Relics of Power, first of all, thank you. And second of all, the campaign is continuing now. So there should be an update in the near future, updating the relics that the players are using for their characters in my Hinterlands of Elandria campaign. So as those relics develop in power in the campaign, I will update Relics of Power so you can see how those get more powerful and how I'm doing it. However you decide to support the show, I really, really, really appreciate it. I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.